Hello. Our dashboard was specifically built thinking of the needs and the goals of an investor considering investment opportunities in the neurotech or neuroscience startups market. So the first page of the dashboard is an overview of main KPIs. The first KPIs consider a country information, so startups, funding, and exits per country. Exit is mainly the goal of the investors. So an exit is when a company is acquired, meaning M&A, or goes public on a stock exchange market, such as Nasdaq, for example, in an IPO. So an investor seeing this first page is able to consider that the US is an outlier on number of startups and, of course, in the proportion of funded startups, and finally in the number of exits per country. So the US is a good place to look for the next investment opportunity, but there are also other places. And however, it's also not that much in blue ocean anymore. So there are a lot of funding available. So the equity, the price for the funding should be higher. And however, the number of exits is much higher than any other country. We can see the highest country, I mean, three. We also compared the funding to the exit prices, which would be the return per investment of the venture capitalist. So we can see that an M&A, for example, it returns almost 20 times, can return almost 20 times more than an IPO. And even when we consider the average return, it's a better option. Throughout the whole dashboard, we're going to have the two parameters to allow the user to filter specific groups within the neurotech industry, such as, for example, medical, which would be treatments that need prescription, and medical devices. So this is the conjunction of both subgroups of the industry, and we can realize that the numbers change a bit. The second page of the dashboard is also focused on geolocation, but it brings an overview of funding maturity, revenue maturity. Tableau allows us to create maps with too many dimensions, so we decided to use the geolocation, of course, but also the size of the dot represents the number of startups, and the color of the pie slices represent the maturity of the funding. So if it's a seed capital, an early stage, late stage venture, or private equity, M&A, and IPO. And the same works for the revenue analysis. And on the second line, we did an analysis for IPOs and M&As, and we decided to break into countries instead of states to guarantee that the numbers would not be too much granular, and the analysis would not be too much fragmented. From now on, we considered an analysis of funding distribution according to revenue. Here we once again consider a few dimensions. So the size of the square shows the average of number of funding rounds in the second, for example, and the color shows the average of total funding amount, okay, in US dollars. So we can realize, and here, like the first graph works the same way, but when we see it's for the total funding, the sum of the funding amount and the sum of the funding itself, of the funding event itself. And we can consider, for example, that most of the funding is concentrated on startups from 1 million to 50 million in revenue, which means that if I invest on a startup later than that stage, I would probably not have a follow-on investment. So I would probably not have another investment round, and I would have to wait for an exit. And the same way we analyzed the investment distribution to revenue, we have an analysis to industry and an analysis of exit per industry. So here we have, for example, an analysis that says that diagnostics and platforms, healthcare, biotech would be good sub-industries, subgroups in the neurotech industry to invest on. Finally, we did an analysis of correlation between a few factors and the total funding amount, the price on M&As, and the money raised at an IPO. And we were able to identify that the number of patents, right here, the second column, has somehow influences the value of the M&A. as does the number of funding rounds. So in this case, and it has a negative impact. So the lower the funding rounds, the higher the price of the M&A, and as does the number of investors. So the lower the number of the higher the lower the number of investors, the higher the price on an M&A. So considering this, we decided to build a radar showing a few startups for the investors to keep an eye on. So Neurotech, for example, has a high number, extremely high, by the way, number of total patents, and has had only a few rounds. Of course, the idea would be before less than 4 rounds, but still they're close to average. And they have higher number of investors, but of course, we did like only a simple trend line, so maybe the higher number of investors won't affect that much. And so the investor reading this report is able to select Neuropace dot and gather much more information on it. So Tableau allows any user to exclude any dot, keep only, to make visualization easier, and to see the full data. So the full line of a full description and many other info that might be relevant for the user of this dashboard.